In the year 1920, news broke out about the possibility that Chicago White Sox players purposely lost the 1919 World Series. It was suspected that 8 players, Chick Gandil, Happy Felsch, Eddie Chicot, Lefty Williams, Fred McMullen, Swede Risberg, Buck Weaver, and Joe Jackson, participated in exchange for a range of payment depending on each player. As information on the situation developed, it became clearer and clearer that the World Series had been tampered with. Outrage struck America, and thus the Black Sox Scandal was created. The Black Sox Scandal began when Chick Gandil, the first baseman for the White Sox, met renowned gambler and baseball expert Joseph Sport Sullivan in a hotel room at the Buckminster in Boston on September 18, 1919, 13 days prior to the beginning of the World Series. This is where Gandil proposed the idea of throwing the upcoming World Series. Sullivan, along with former ballplayer turned gambler Sleepy Bill Burns and Bill Maharg, were able to sway the infamous gambler Arnold Rothstein to fund the whole scheme. The Fall Classic of 1919, which heavily favored Chicago talent-wise, came to a close with the Reds winning the title 5-3 in the series. Immediate suspicion arose around the possibility that the White Sox intentionally lost the series due to their sporadic bouts of poorly played baseball, but it wasn't until September 1920 that the media reports broke out about the fix. This resulted in a failed trial against the players, but a significant American event was born. The events these 8 men were involved in holds a legacy in America because of the actions and the reasoning of the men, the aftermath of the World Series, and how the scandal affected America during this time period, and the mark on American culture rooted by Joe Jackson. It is impossible to know all the motives of these 8 men, but it is known that money was the most prominent factor in their decision. The league had recently started paying players a flat rate rather than according to ticket sales. Joe Jackson, the star player of the team, had a yearly salary of $6,000, despite ranking 4th in batting average. Eddie Chicot, like Jackson, made a salary of $6,000 during his 1919 season. Chicot as well posted impressive numbers, leading the league in wins with 29. Chicot's statement on his participation in the scandal was that he wanted to provide a social status for his family and that he wanted to keep his family farm in Michigan. Chicot's morals were not subdued by greed, but rather to benefit his family, who did not have the economic backing that a professional sports player would have in today's age. Chicago White Sox players could not avoid the low salaries due to the reserve clause, which gave their team all control over the player, including the power to prevent the player from signing a contract with another team. Players were only able to leave the team if they were traded or released from the organization. There is no official record of how much the players were originally promised, but Chick Gandil, who at the time was being paid $4,000 by the league, wanted to get paid $20,000 by gamblers. This immense boost in pay was the ultimate draw towards throwing the series. All the players were being paid extremely low rates, even though the game was selling out. The White Sox gave up glory for money because they were making so little. Until the 9th, when he eased up, the Black Sox had but 4 hits off him. This is a description about one of the games where Chicago was playing terribly, much worse than an average game that season. At the time, America was flourishing culturally, with brand new forms of entertainment and extreme rise in gambling. This new network of high rollers were evidently fixated with the World Series, the biggest sporting event in American culture at the time. The presence of betting intertwined with the World Series, and this became a huge market, and it also led to possibly an extremely large amount of money that could be owned by someone who was able to influence what would happen. The motivations for fixing the 1919 World Series most likely differ player to player, but the end goal for each of them was very similar: to make the money that White Sox owner Charles Comiskey should have been rewarding them. The Black Sox scandal quickly cemented its role as a nationally debated topic because of the very publicized drama that began with the World Series fix, and its involvement with the gamblers continued on through the proceedings with the players in the courtroom and the banning of the men from Major League Baseball. Fans felt blindsided because baseball had always been a game that was untouched by the problematic world around it. The team has 9 innings to try to score more runs than the other team and get 27 outs to win a ball game. If neither team can do this in the allotted amount of innings, they continue the process until one team can top the other. When the papers stated that the White Sox had thrown the World Series with the help of gamblers, the emotions of baseball fans were nonetheless angry. The fans in the game of baseball had been undermined by a group of men who were participating in seemingly criminal endeavors. To think those fellows we cheered for their heroic work would throw us down, said a fan in a letter to the Sporting News. He continued, even the small boys on the sandlots have been swindled. The newly born scandal truly triggered outrage in America. The upcoming events of the trial itself were dramatic due to the controversy of it and the constant developments in the trial that sparked the lasting national debate over the topic. The trial itself was a host to much drama. The jury ignored the confessions of the players due to the simple fact that they did not want to prosecute them. The written confessions of Eddie Cicotte, Joe Jackson, Happy Felch, and Lefty Williams mysteriously disappeared before the close of the trial. These players were arguably the best out of all the 8 in regard to their statistics in 1919 and 1920, the seasons leading up to the outbreak of the Black Sox Scandal. As said before, the 8 men were found innocent in the legal trial, but the statement by newly appointed Commissioner of Baseball, Kennesaw Mount Landish, shook the country to an extent. Regardless of the verdict of juries, no player who throws a ball game, no player that undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player that sits in conference with a bunch of crooked players and gamblers, where the ways and means of throwing a game are discussed and does not promptly tell his club about it, will ever play professional baseball. The players had been banned. Jackson and Cicotte would never play in the big leagues again. 2 men who had reached stardom because of their amazing numbers were now viewed as national villains because of their involvement in the scandal that topped all scandals in the sport of baseball, sports, and scandals in that time period. During the trial that took place in 1921, Cicotte, Jackson, and Lefty Williams immediately admitted to the claim that they were part of some scheme to make money from the involved gamblers. Statements made by Cicotte and Jackson state the counterpoint that they were part of the scandal but did not play worse than normal in the World Series itself. The stats support this statement. Shoeless Joe had set a record for amount of hits ever in a World Series at 12 and hit .375 in the series, a very high batting average. The confusion of Shoeless Joe's innocence spawned a countrywide debate. The Black Sox scandal as a whole wreaked havoc on America in a social aspect. The fans were undermined, and the scandal itself was one of the main topics discussed rolling into 1920s America, a time where American culture saw many other changes. The scandal was much more than the fix itself. Many players left a legacy in baseball history, but few are as well known or tragic as that of Shoeless Joe Jackson. This has even come up as recent as 2016 when the MLB denied his entry into Hall of Fame again. The fact that this was even considered is remarkable, and it goes to show the national interest on the topic that can last almost 100 years. Part of the reason why Shoeless Joe Jackson is such an important and beloved figure in light of the trial is his good-natured and simple personality. And said, "I am going to meet the greatest umpire of all, and he knows I'm innocent." Even after he was banned from the league, he was not pessimistic about it. Jackson was a complex person, and the mystery behind his brain, which is afflicted by a lack of education and kindred spirit, may spark the interest that is built up by Jackson. He was the type of person who seemed to be able to do no harm, so this is why his innocence in particular is discussed to this day. The scandal itself holds a spot in prominent U.S. history because of its feature in the classic novel The Great Gatsby and the Godfather trilogy. It is also featured in Field of Dreams. However, it is focused primarily on Shoeless Joe and portrayed him as somewhat of a folk hero, a position that suited him after his national attention transpiring over the last century. The legacy of the scandal would not be as grand as it was if the players were given their fair share and Charles Comiskey respected the players. The massive reactions from fans of baseball after the scandal had been revealed is what empowered the Joe Jackson controversy to stay in the limelight for years to come and have such a large role in culture as it does.